Hey folks, welcome back to another Think With Me Thursday. My name is Justin with Effective. We're going live a little bit earlier than I had planned today. I changed the schedule for it just a couple seconds ago because my schedule changed, but welcome to the stream. This week, we're going to do a continuation of looking at Your Best by Carey Nieuwhof. We got a little ways into the notes last week, but I would also love to hear your questions, your comments, your thoughts about productivity. One community post that I recently did on the YouTube channel is, how do you define your core work? And I would love to hear from you in the chat if you've got some thoughts around that. Now, core work being defined as the highest value stuff that you do. And so if you've got some insights into what your core work is, by all means, pop them into the chat. Couple things, just want to do some housekeeping stuff first and foremost. If you haven't become a channel member yet, do consider joining. There's the join button down at the bottom of the video here on YouTube, or if you're on mobile and you don't have the join button yet, do click on the link in the description below. You can become a channel member and support everything that we're doing here at Effective, from these live streams to our videos and more to come. Second thing, I'm working on Obsidian Made Simple version 2 with Francesco D'Alessio. A lot of it's going to be the same. Much of Obsidian hasn't really changed over the course of the last couple of years, but there's some good, interesting stuff that I'm working on to bake into part of this course. A look at the top plugins for Obsidian that you might find helpful, plus an intro to PKM module to discover and cover the basics of what PKM is. So if you're interested in that, you can get it as part of Obsidian Made Simple. Head on over to obsidianmadesimple.com. If you want to get in on that, you'll get access to it when it goes live in the near future. That being said, I'm ready to dive into At Your Best. I'm going to head on over to the Windows machine here, and we'll get rolling into it. Let me know in the chat if you have any thoughts or comments that you are interested in sharing today. So if you weren't with us last week, At Your Best is a book by Carey Nieuwhof that goes into basically the ideas that he has learned to live a healthy, balanced, but yet also productive life after dealing with burnout about 15 years ago. He has this idea called the Thrive Cycle, which is based around a calendar that you use to kind of gauge your general energy flow throughout the day. Most of us have a routine of, a cycle that our bodies and our minds go through in terms of energy. And so as a result, right away in the morning, you might not quite be at your peak, but then you hit your peak at, say, 9 o'clock, and you're at your peak from 9 to noon. Then you have a little lull, then you're at your peak again, 1 to 2 or 2 to 3, and then you start really dropping off from there. Most of us have some kind of a cycle like that we go through. And his case is that if we can embrace that, that's a positive thing. That allows us to really nail down what's most effective for us. And if we can leverage our highest energy times to do our most effective work, the things that really only you or I can do, then that's the work that needs to be done during that time. If we can leverage that consistently, especially leveraging deep work from Cal Newport alongside of that, that's a very positive thing overall. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get into the highlights here and just start talking through some of it. We're just partway through the book from last week. Okay, so this is really interesting here. This is tying this idea to time off a bit, the book. But he's saying here, creating margin allows you to take time for yourself. You'll take the time to get to know yourself better and work through your stuff. Self-awareness and emotional intelligence are some of the greatest predictors of success in leadership and in life overall. I can definitely agree with that from experiences that I have had. At least having the aspect of being able to take time for yourself and be aware of yourself, you do get to know yourself a bit, what works well, what doesn't work well. Self-awareness does grow your own emotional intelligence if you're able to say, hey, I'm feeling upset. Why am I feeling upset? Or I'm feeling stressed, and be able to dig into and understand why that is. You can really process through it. But in a lot of ways, what he's saying here, I think, is that margin is critical for self-improvement. Let's see here. This is really also related to the topic of burnout. If you give yourself enough margin in the day, that really helps avoid burnout too, because you're not just running yourself ragged. Let's see here. I'm going to condense this idea into a permanent note. Margin is critical for self-improvement. This also seems like it's probably another permanent note. When we have margin in our schedules, we can spend time on ourselves. Self-reflection, self-awareness, and self-improvement. For example, taking time for myself allows me to notice how I'm feeling, which leads me to understanding the root cause and taking action if I'm able. Margin also allows one to, let's see here. Assess one's priorities, trajectory, and we'll just say priorities and check. Margin also allows one to assess their priorities and trajectory, and to make in essence, margin lets you see, gives you space. Gives you space to see the big picture. I think that kind of is the gist of what I want to pull out of here. Margin's critical for self-improvement. It's giving ourselves space. When we have margin in our schedules, we can spend time on ourselves, self-reflection, self-awareness, and self-improvement. For example, taking time for myself allows me to notice how I'm feeling, which leads me to understanding the root cause of that emotion and taking action if I'm able. Margin also allows one to assess their priorities and trajectory and to make any necessary adjustments. In essence, margin gives you space to see the big picture. Okay, that also feels like another permanent note. I'm gonna go my best, margin, burnout. At the core, margin is really just extra padding. For time, it's space, empty space in a schedule. For finances, it's extra runway. For health, it's investment in healthy habits. All right. What's another area? For we can leave it with that. This can be a really simple note. Margin is space in our lives, so we're not running at 100%. Let's put it this way. Running on the edge all the time. Think of it like running your engine at the highest RPM possible. That's not healthy for the engine. For running constantly running your engine at the highest RPM possible, that's not healthy for the engine, nor is it healthy for you. Because in a lot of ways that's true. For example, I've had a career change myself, and if my wife and I did not have finances in the bank, having extra runway saved up, we would be in a pretty difficult position right now. But thankfully, we have some breathing room there. Time, we need to work on that a little bit. And health, working on that one. There's multiple areas. This is what also kind of comes back to the idea of what I've talked about in previous live streams, the VST approach. Seeing the big picture of life. And like last week, I showed you my vision board and some of the productivity experiments that I've been working with. Being able to see that big picture of life and do, say, a wheel of life activity to understand where you're at can also help you see maybe where you're lacking margin. If you don't have enough money in the bank, or you don't have enough time in your schedule, if your health is kind of running awry, or you're not really investing where you need to be, that could very well be a sign that you don't have enough margin. But if we're starting to think about productivity only in terms of the amount of work that you're getting done, or only really in the context of work, then I think that's where we run into trouble. We don't invest in margin in our lives then, because it becomes all about how can I maximize the efficiency of all of the time that I have. And if I don't maximize that time, well, then I'm at a loss. But margin is really important to avoiding burnout. And it's really important to keeping a holistic picture in our minds because, so I'm gonna open up in this note here. Margin gives you space to see the big picture. Permanent note. This is also interesting because I haven't spent a lot of time writing permanent notes out of book notes in the last couple months. Big picture. Because margin is giving ourselves space. We now have the time to assess our priorities, goals, and life, health, and overall trajectory. Without extra space, we live reactively. Only handling the emergencies that come up each day. But because margin is giving ourselves space, when we have margin, we now have the time to assess our priorities, goals, life, health, and overall trajectory. Instead of reacting, we can plan, strategize, and map out where we are and where we want to go next. Seeing the big picture is critical for keeping ourselves out of burnout and staying effective. All right, here comes more permanent notes. Topics. Burnout. Big picture. Okay. Seeing the big picture is critical for keeping ourselves out of burnout. We often relegate productivity tactics and strategies to only work. This is short-sighted. Our lives are work. Work is only one component of our lives. One of many components in our lives. See Wheel of Life. Margin gives you space to see the big picture, and it's this place where we can accurately assess our overall life health. When we have this picture, we can then plan how to address any shortcomings in our lives. Without insight into the big picture. Hey, Alex. Welcome. Good to see you back on the stream again. Without insight into the big picture. What am I trying to say here? Without insight into the big picture, our perspective becomes lopsided and out of balance, which often leads us closer to burnout. Well, it was a fun little adventure into margin. This is a good illustration of how powerful it is to have margin as well. He's saying, get me on a slam day and it's so easy for me to snap at you. Get me when I feel like I have a wealth of time and I'll smile, pull up a chair, and invite you to hang out. I am the most kind when I have the most margin. I think that's pretty true for a lot of us, myself included. He's saying that his time scattered in a million directions and was so unfocused. I'll be honest, this has been kind of the hallmark of my last 12 months. Not really having a clear direction, not really sure how to approach things with life and work, being relatively unfocused. Burnout really, I think, impacted me in that way. But I often found myself spending time not just on what matters least, but what matters most to other people instead of what matters most to me. Because almost always what matters most to you is not what matters most to other people, especially people who maybe your boss or the business owner. But we kind of fall into that when we don't have enough time, enough margin in our lives. I thought this was a unique insight as well. Get around driven people and you'll quickly realize that many people also have more ambition than they have capacity. This is why teams are so important, I think. Excuse me just a second. This is why teams are so important and working together and gathering around leaders. Is that it's true, a lot of people, I mean myself included, I have more ambition than I have the ability to do stuff. This is also partly the reason why we take on more than we can handle when it comes to committing to things. In our minds, our ambition says, yeah, this is the thing for me. But our capacity says, no, I don't have capacity for that. Let's see. It's easy to say yes out of ambition, but fail to have capacity. I'm actually going to expand that highlight. Whoa. Not what I meant to do there. Found that there. This, I think, hits the problem that I have with a lot of traditional productivity advice. Traditional time management makes you more efficient, but it doesn't make you more effective over the long run. Efficiency fails because there's a fundamental limit, a wall you hit in time management when all you're trying to do is become more efficient. The limit is this: you're managing a fixed commodity, which is why time management usually leaves you feeling drained, not energized. You're managing a growing list of demands with a limited asset. Time doesn't grow, it won't expand. Time management brings you diminishing returns. People think money is a limited commodity. Well, yes, but not more limited than time. You can always make more money, you can never make more time. Jumping down here too, he's talking about stop saying you don't have the time, start admitting you didn't make the time. This has been popping up in my Readwise highlights here and there lately, and I've been trying to actually make that adjustment and just to admit to myself when I see, oh, I didn't have time to clean up the kitchen island, and I feel a little overwhelmed by it. I'm starting to say, no, I didn't have time. That's not the truth. I didn't make time to do it. That was an intentional choice. I chose not to clean that up because I chose to do something else. And starting to think in terms of intentional choices in regard to the use of my time instead of saying, I just didn't have time to do that, has empowered me to say, it's okay. Like, I really have limited time and I chose to do something else with it. I think that's one of the things that's really helpful when it comes to looking at time management, I guess. Because, yeah, you can't manage time itself, but you can manage yourself. That's why I like to think of it in terms of self-management, self-control, life management in a sense too. But this has been really powerful for me to start doing, admitting that I didn't make the time to do something. There's power in doing that. The other thing too that I'm noticing in this bit about time management is that he is making a distinction between being powerful and in charge of yourself in regards to handling your time and feeling powerless to time. So a powerful response is what he's talking about here. I missed the deadline. I'm really sorry I didn't complete the project or didn't make time to complete the project. That's my fault. Let's talk about how I can turn that around. Versus the powerless mode of, oh, I didn't have a chance to get to it. Basically saying, I'm blaming time for running away from me. Instead of taking responsibility for myself and saying, oh, that's my fault. I didn't actually take the time to do it. I'm just gonna make a note here. It is interesting, though, that the whole idea of time kind of gives us a context in which to live our lives. There is a sense of urgency as a result of being in this context of time. If you think about it, if time didn't exist and it was just forever, we could just do whatever we wanted to, whenever we wanted to, and we wouldn't have to worry about it. But time allows us, the context of time allows us to prioritize and say, this is important, this is not important. This is more important than this other thing. I just think that's an interesting thing that's happening as a result of time. So here is an interesting thing here. He's saying up here, I'm going to suggest you do what I did, abandon balance as a goal. This is far more liberating than you might think. Balance appears to be quite unreachable for most of us. Many people say they want it, but in an age when so much is coming at us at once and opportunity abounds, buzzing devices threaten to overtake even the quietest moments. Most people never find the balance that they dream of. But then he also says most people who accomplish significant things aren't balanced people. They're passionate people. Balanced people do off well, but being off isn't of much use if you have things you want to do that require you to be on. So yeah, I've got some thoughts here, and then Alex, I'm going to come back to your chat message. This is what I think, this challenged me the most. The last couple years, I've really been influenced by the ideas of the book Time Off by Max Frenzel and John Fitch. It's a really great read. Curtis McHale has a really interesting video over on his channel discussing Time Off, and from his perspective, it's really a, I think, quote unquote, white guy book, because it doesn't apply to people who don't have an abundance of wealth, you know, I mean, or have cushy jobs. I mean, myself, I've had those in the past too. So there is an element of that. But the thing that was really gnawing at me reading this is I was finding myself wanting more time off, more time doing non-work things, more time finding balance. As he's talking about here, after reading that book, I wasn't as driven or pushing into things that I enjoy and things that I want to do, because I felt like, well, maybe I'm doing this life thing wrong because I've got so many things going on. There's an element of truth to that, because if you over push yourself, over commit yourself, as we were talking previously, if you caught that in the stream, if not, you can DVR back through it. But that you have to have margin in your life to be able to assess yourself, to be able to spend time with yourself, to work on yourself, and also just to have space in your life so that if something puts pressure on you, that you actually have some overflow space. So the example I was using previously with money, finances, if you have no runway at all and all of a sudden you lose a job or there's a temporary economic difficulty for yourself, that puts pressure on you, and because you're running already at 100%, there's no margin, and as a result of that, that's a problem. It becomes a big problem. But if you had 2 months of runway, even 2 months of expenses saved up, or even an extra $1,000, as Dave Ramsey likes to suggest, at least to start off with, that removes some of that pressure. Even 1% is a little bit of margin. So talking about that, you do have to have time in your schedule. You do have to have time. But what he's making the case for here is that it's better to be passionate about something and pursue the things that you're passionate about and make time to do them than it is to try to find this balance between being off and on. And so this, I feel a little bit of tension inside over this, because there is this pull to do more relaxing things, to not be as on as much. But then there also is this pull of like, there are these things like working on this YouTube channel that I just really enjoy doing, sitting down and doing these live streams. I really enjoy doing them. But especially when I have a full-time job, it can feel like extra stuff. But if it brings me joy, if it brings me life to do them, even though I'm on, isn't that a good thing? And so there's this tension that's been created inside of me to find the right place of where's the right level of margin in my life for my activities, the things that I'm doing, and to do those well, but also to do them with passion, as he's discussing. Alex is saying in the chat, I feel most powerless on time when I have an unrealistic deadline. have to put everything else aside if that deadline is my priority against my will. Yeah, I totally get that. For say if a boss says, hey, you need to do this big project and it needs to be done by next Wednesday, but it's really a 3-week project. That is an unfortunate circumstance. And yeah, I'm not not a big fan of that type of stuff. So, but that is a very powerless thing. But the good thing is that even though a deadline is being dictated externally and you don't have a power to choose it, you do have some choices as well, ways to be powerful in that circumstance. One, it's always, I think, okay if you're going to end up, metaphorically killing yourself working on something, to say, hold on a second, are we realistically assessing the timeline on this? And if we do need it pushed through, say in 1 week instead of 3 weeks, are we okay with the diminishing quality that it's going to have on this project? We can raise concerns like that. That's a powerful way to approach that. The other powerful way to approach it is just to make that your one priority for that week, and then do everything that you can to focus your highest energy times on that one project. And then if it needs to spill into other areas or time focuses, then it can. But it's about choosing what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, choosing your responses to something instead of just saying, oh man, the boss said I have to do this by next Wednesday. That's a problem because it's not realistic. And you might not be able to make changes to that. But the good thing is that you can choose how you're going to handle that. And if that's an unhealthy environment too, as a result of that, it's also okay to choose alternative employment options as well. Not always the easiest for everyone. I can attest to that myself. It's not always the easiest choice to make, but it is. It's for the best in the long run. So, okay, here. Whenever I decide to embrace something, allow it into my calendar and life, I'm inspired by these words with some attribute to John Wesley. Set yourself on fire with passion and people will come from miles to watch you burn. Put commitments on your calendar and routine that you're passionate about. Balanced people don't change the world. Passionate people do. Bold that one as well. What if you embraced everything you choose to do, not with resignation, indifference, or weariness, but with passion? What would be different at work, at home, with your kids, with your faith, with your neighbors and best friends if you dove into everything you chose to do with passion? If you're going to take a break, take it. Enjoy it. If you're shooting for 8 hours of rest, sleep deeply. Want to take a nap? Enjoy yourself. Don't feel guilty. Embrace it. Okay, so some of what I'm hearing him say here is this idea of, instead of when you're saying you're going to be off, this is one aspect of it. It's when you're saying you're going to be off, taking a break, taking a nap, sleeping well, don't be concerned with not being on. Finding that balance, I guess, is what he's saying. But instead, passionately pursue your rest. Passionately pursue your rest. The other thing that I'm hearing here too, or reading from this, is choose to be passionate. Choose to be passionate. By the way, if you're liking this stream so far, be sure to hit the like button below. It does help more people discover our channel and the streams that we're doing here. So it would be much obliged if you'd give it a little thumbs up. Appreciate it. The other thing I think that he's saying here is just to make passion the center of your choices. Because if you make passion the center of your decision making, you're going to focus on the things that you're best at, the things that you want to do, the things that you can really excel at. Because let's face it, in today's modern world where you basically have to stand out in a sea of hundreds or thousands of people to get any kind of attention. This is the case that Newport makes with So Good They Can't Ignore You and Deep Work, that you have to choose something that you're passionate about, that you can invest deeply into. And so if you choose the things that you enjoy, choose the things that just fire you up inside, or that you choose to be fired up about, and make those the center of your calendar, of your priorities, the things that you're committing to do, then that's an important thing. So I'm wrestling through this idea here, trying to come to a full understanding of it, but I think this is what he's trying to say. The key to living passionately is to focus your time on what is truly important to you and to choose to do those things wholeheartedly with enthusiasm. Stress makes you skim. Oof, that one hits. Reading that again. I'm going to highlight that one separately, and I'm also going to bold it. Weariness wears you out, and when you have nothing left to give, it's too easy to coast. Okay, yeah. So this is what he was trying to say. As I was doing this whole monologue about things up here, he's really saying that the key to living passionately is to focus your time on what truly is most important to you, and to do those things wholeheartedly. So if you're doing it because you feel pressured and stressed out to do it, you're just going to skate through it. You're going to skim. It's not going to be something that you're going to enjoy. I guess a real world example of this for me is just the simple thing of cleanup. I do at some level think it's important to have a level of a clean workspace or a clean kitchen, clean environment. But because I often feel pressure and stress for other things in my life, I often skim through that and skate through cleaning the kitchen or cleaning up my office. And instead, it just grows and grows and grows and grows until all of a sudden I have way too big of a mess to handle in one sitting. And then it just becomes a challenge for me overall. So that's a thing. But I like how he's saying here, just define what's truly most important to you. And this comes back to the community post I referenced way at the beginning of the live stream. How do you choose your core work? How do you define what's most important to you truly? Not these senses and ideas of what we think is most important to us, but how do we truly define what is most important to us? I don't have a firm answer on that yet. I really don't. He's also saying here, embracing passion also means you have to limit the things you decide to do. Thriving calls for a wholehearted embrace, not of more, but of less done well. This is Dieter Rams or Rams. Less but better, his quote. Really, I think is kind of a key mantra for this. Let me know in the chat if you're seeing stream issues, because I'm seeing buffering on YouTube side, so apologize if that's going on. Okay, cool. Thanks, Alex. Apparently YouTube's being goofy on my end, so. When you allow something into your calendar in life, make it a new goal to pursue it passionately. Interestingly enough, I've kind of done this with mountain biking. Mountain biking is something that is really new to me. I've always enjoyed biking ever since I was a little kid, but I never got into mountain biking. And mountain biking has been something that I have been pursuing passionately. I've wanted to get out on the mountain bike trails around here. I've wanted to get better at it. I've wanted to learn it. I've wanted to see other people do it well and then try to emulate that myself. I've got a long ways to go in learning how to do that, but I just find it really, really fun to do. But it's something that I've allowed into my calendar, into my life. And as a result of that, I have wanted to pursue it passionately. Now, this was obviously before I read this book where I started doing some mountain biking. But I think this is a key idea here, frankly. So this is a shift in the book narrative. So prior to this point, he's leading into this idea. He's making his case that what we've done prior doesn't work well for us. Taking this idea, trying to find balance, managing our time, just living reactively to everything. It's not the best way to do things. But then he's transitioning into the solution here. He's talking about how your energy waxes and wanes over your waking hours. And we were talking about this a little earlier in the stream too, about how you have a cycle kind of that your body goes through throughout the day. Generally speaking, you can kind of map your most energetic hours out on a calendar, on a clock, and say, generally between, say, 9 and noon, I am the most energetic. And so this gets into his idea of just seeing this here. I should highlight that. He's getting into leveraging your energy levels to be effective with things. 3 leveraged hours beats 10 unleveraged hours. So again, coming back to Alex's comment about a project, maybe it takes 3 weeks to do, but you have a week to do it. This is where you can leverage your hours. Find your prime spot. Find the area of, your green zone, as Newhoff terms it, and then leverage that by doing that most important thing in that block of time. So you might be able to make intense progress on something in 3 hours if you're focused on it for that time during your highest energy period, and then move from there. What he's talking about here, we've talked about it a lot recently, but he's got the concept of green, yellow, and red zones for energy, green being your top, red being your bottom, and yellow being wherever you are in the middle. And he's basically saying here that the activities that line up with your gifting, passion, and high impact are the optimal focus for your green zone. Later on in the book, he gets into, for him, how it's basically writing and strategic thinking and planning are the 2 main activities for his business that are his optimal green zone focus. He also does a podcast, which if you click on his name in the description, you'll get access to that. It's over on his YouTube channel. He's also got an audio version of it as well, if you're interested in. He interviews some really interesting people over there. But yeah, I think it's an interesting thing. But he was saying that he doesn't do, I mean, his podcast is the most visible thing that he does, but he says that he does that in his yellow zone. And the reason being is that it's easy for him to do that, but all the writing that he needs to do, whether it's prep for that show, or it's writing a talk that he's giving, or writing a blog post, something of that sort, all of that stuff happens in his green zone, because that is what powers his business going forward. Same thing with strategic planning, being able to understand the investments to make with time and money and energy for a business is really important. And while he says up here too, most people wouldn't invest their money unthinkingly, but so many people do invest their time and energy unthinkingly. It's interesting because, we see money as this thing of like, well, if I get rid of it, then I don't have it anymore. But because time and energy just kind of are a natural part of our rhythm, we don't necessarily think about it in terms of investing, but it would probably do us well to do that. And so, yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how this develops, these ideas develop in my day-to-day life. What are you thinking? I want to hear what you're saying. Let me know in the chat if you have some ideas or thoughts on the green zones, the yellow zones, this idea of letting passion guide you, and as far as the usage of your time versus trying to find this balance between on and off. Also, thanks everybody for joining this stream. This has been fun today. I know I am going to sign off here in just a few minutes, but a couple things. One, if you have any questions about the book today, about the ideas we've talked about Obsidian or productivity, pop them in the chat. I'm open to taking some Q&A here at the end and just chatting through some things. Secondly, if you haven't become a channel member yet, consider doing so. You can click the join button down below. There are a couple options if you want to support what we're doing here at Effective. It supports these live streams, the videos that we produce on the channel, and a whole lot more that is coming. So if you're interested in becoming a channel member, do so. And then lastly, if you're interested in checking out the book from today, At Your Best by Carey Nieuwhof, there is an affiliate link in the description below. Go check that out. If you want to use the affiliate link, feel free to. If not, that's totally okay. But just want to give the option there too as another option to support the channel. But yeah, I guess just some closing thoughts and ideas. What am I going to do with this? Well, for one, as we've been talking about the last few weeks, I've been building an iteration on my productivity system. I need to do some more work with it, but I know one of the key concepts that I want to engage in is leveraging this idea of gifting passion and impact into my green zones, using my time well. And then also really developing this sense of passion for the things that I do, and really disallowing things in my life and in my schedule that don't foster that kind of passion for me. I think if I can start to do that, then the impact of what I'm doing becomes all the more. For example, I just took on a gig in about a month to help some businesses in the area understand the impacts of remote work. And so I think that's really an interesting thing. The other thing that I mentioned already was just mountain biking. I've really enjoyed the process of learning how to ride a mountain bike, because it is a little different from riding a bike on a road. How do you ride on a mountain bike trail? But just diving into that, I've really enjoyed that a lot. And so I think probably those two things are really going to be the most helpful for me. Alex is asking, do you sort your daily tasks into energy categories? That's an interesting question. I haven't really been actively doing that too much. I've tried it in the past. The problem that often happens with that is it can be a little too granular to manage, say in a task manager like Todoist or things or OmniFocus or something like that, to have to put an energy tag on every single task that comes in or that I put in there. Um, One, I might not necessarily know what that task is. And two, I might not necessarily know how to um, how to classify that. It might be misclassified too, or something. But in the light of how he talks about gifting, passion, and impact being your optimal green zone focus, the way I would prefer to approach it is to pick categories of activities that are green zone activities. So, like he mentions, writing and strategic planning being his two green zone activities. And so that's what he's got baked into his green zones over the course of the week. And then within that, there may be specific projects or tasks that he's working on. And so I would almost rather assign buckets of work that are green zone activities versus assigning daily tasks individually into categories. Thinking of it more as from the top down perspective versus the bottom up. I know a lot of task managers are geared more towards the bottom up. What does this individual little thing need to be categorized as? But for me, identifying those broader categories, I think, is a more important and more effective way to manage energy in regards to your day-to-day activities. Now, granted, there might be different kinds of activities that flex and flow over time. And one of the things that Newhoff mentions in the book is that when you're sensing a change with things, just stop and reflect. Do you need to adjust where your green zones are, where your red zones are, where your yellow zones are on your calendar? Are your responsibilities changing or shifting? And as a result of that, do different responsibilities need to be in your green zone or in your red zone, your yellow zone, so on? So there is some flex that happens throughout this, and he's recognizing of that. It's, your energy cycles are not going to be the same from the day that you're 20 to the day that you're 60. They're going to flex and flow, and the activities that you do are going to be different, sometimes even every 6 months, sometimes even every 2 or 3 years. It just depends on the season of life that you're in. I know right now, for me, having a young family, some of my activities shift and change. Our schedules shift and change a lot too. And so I have to keep that in context. But that's an awesome question. I would, just to summarize the answer, instead of doing individual tasks and categories for energy, I would try to focus on broad areas and then just focus on working on those areas or projects that you've assigned to those energy zones. Yeah, so we're coming up on an hour here. I appreciate everybody for jumping on the stream a little bit earlier than I anticipated today. I've had, like I mentioned at the beginning, a little bit of a schedule change today, but that's okay. But this has been fun. Next week, I'll plan to do some further note taking on At Your Best. Would love to hear more questions from you too. And if you haven't checked out the At Your Best book, and you're interested in doing so, do click on that affiliate link below if you want to support the channel. Otherwise, just go to Amazon and search At Your Best by Carey Nieuwhof, and you'll find it pretty quickly. But for now, that's the end of the stream for this week. Thanks for joining me, Justin, from Effective on another Think With Me Thursday. I'll catch you next week, but until that time, stay effective. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Yakov. I appreciate it a lot. It's been really fun to have you around for so long with the forum, the community, on the YouTube channel too. So I hope everything's going well for you and where you're at. Anyway, I'm signing off. Have a great day, everyone.